So we had started on Monday, and I had gone, or did we start on Sunday?
And we start on Monday.
No, we started on Monday, and I had gone home from school on break on Saturday, late on Saturday, and then we'd packed all of Sunday, and then waking up the next day, I was in a tent, and the tent had done well enough. It didn't have a fly, so not that it rained or anything, but you wake up and everything's just a little wet inside and outside the tent. And we packed up, and it's definitely a little difficult because you're still getting used to life on the trail and you're getting your systems down. And waking up in a tent is a little less ideal, certainly, than waking up in a lean-to where everything's spread out and it's just easier. But we were able to get up, and the first thing I noticed is that I had four fairly significant blisters on my feet, which we discovered were from the footbeds that I'd brought along. So I got rid of those, and we kind of had to make a decision because right at that trailhead, there's a spot where you can hike out to a road, which we weren't sure if it was plowed, but it would have been a lot quicker than going to Pasico. And just because my blisters did seem kind of serious and they could put the trip in jeopardy, especially we had like a 25-mile or something stretch to the nearest road, which was Pasico, if we decided to keep going, which we did decide to keep going because we figured we'd made it that far and we didn't want to give up our chance just yet. So I took my footbeds out and we started on the trail, which was fine, and my feet felt fine, and we just started to make time. The conditions were relatively good. I think we had snowshoes on for most of the day. The weather was a little on the colder side, but it was a good temp that you could just have your shell on and a fleece underneath and just make good time. And yeah, the day pretty much went by pretty quickly. We were able to make about 16.7 miles, and we made it to the Hamilton Lake Stream Lean-To, which is exactly where we wanted to go. And it was just a relief getting to a lean-to for the first time. It made the trip feel like we were actually going to do it as opposed to a tent.
Yeah, sure. I could imagine getting to that lean-to. At that point, you feel like, okay, we're well over the hump. We're here. We're on our way. And man, waking up that morning with four blisters. I mean, one is bad enough, but four blisters on your first night must have been soul crushing. But you guys pushed through, and obviously it paid off. But I could imagine that would be just absolutely atrocious to be dealing with. And yeah, you were 0.3 miles from the Godfrey Road trail junction, so it's like it very much, especially in that stretch. If you're not familiar with the trail, we're either going or we're not, because we're about to be in super remote land if we just decide to keep pushing. Now it's either now or never for breaking out off the trail. But you guys kept going. Very cool. So throughout the day, did you the blisters, did they maintain, or did the pain kind of go away? Did you hike the rest of the trail always feeling them, or did it kind of, the pain go away a little bit?
Yeah, so they were always there.
It just
Once I
became
took
part
my
of life,
footbed,
basically.
yeah, to an extent. Once I took my footbeds out, they stopped rubbing on the certain points that had just created the blisters in the first place. But certain steps I could feel them, and I knew they were there. Just when I got in my sleeping bag, I could feel my feet and feel just like the blisters on them. And my dad he kept telling me that once you make it to day 4, and you don't have blisters that have like stopped you and you're still going, then they tend to not bother you anymore. And it probably won't be the reason that you don't finish. So I kept that in the back of my mind. And I knew that unless my feet were like bleeding, there was no reason that I should be the reason to kind of stop us on our journey to finishing.
Yeah, sure. Very cool. Definitely nice to have your dad's motivation and expertise in that situation to help you keep pushing through. So that's cool. So you guys made it to the Hamilton Lake Stream lean-to. What were the trails like on day 2? Were you in snowshoes? Were you breaking any trail? Was the trail broken out? How'd that feel?
Yeah, so most of the trail had been broken by a ski team
Okay.
they'd gone through previously. I believe they went from Placid to Northville, and they finished about 5 days before we started. So
Ah,
the
very nice.
freshest, yeah, it was very convenient and certainly very helpful, especially for trail finding, which in the winter can be just unbelievably difficult, as we found with our first kind of attempt
Mm-hmm.
on the trail.
Sure.
And so we were able to, I believe we wore snowshoes almost all day just because it was a softer crust. So in order for us not to punch through on every step, we put on snowshoes, but we weren't post holing with snowshoes or anything. So we were able to make fairly good time with uh, really pretty fresh trail that had already been broken. And then just with snowshoes, we were able to make good time.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right, so day 3 starts at the Hamilton Lake Stream lean-to. Take me through day 3. We'll have you do it, Tim.
Okay, great. So I did want to say also with Henry's blisters on that first day, we were able to, we had these pads, I think they're called compress or
Compede.
compede, that's what they are. And they're these, we were able to patch him up with all of those, change out his footbeds. And that I think made a big difference in terms of him being able to move on and not have it rubbed so much. So day 3, we were up at 6 a.m. What made a difference all of a sudden on day 3? Now, the day before, we ended our day at 5:30, and so all of a sudden, I had 12 hours of. I mean, they're camp chores, and you're running around getting water and doing a bunch of things, but basically, I just had 12 hours of rest, and so I am pretty psyched. I'm up at 6. I'm ready. I'm setting the stove. I'm starting the stove up, and my goal is always to be up at 6 and out by 7. And that's exactly what we did. And we knew we only had a short distance to go. I don't know if it was 4 miles or so to get to Pasico. And Pasico was exciting because, one, I knew once we got close to the roads, the trails were much more likely to be broken by people, by day hikers. And also, there's cell phone service there, so we're going to be able to reach out to Elizabeth, my wife, and Henry's mom. And every time we got to one of these, I think there are only 3 places. There's Pasico, Blue Mountain, and Long Lake where you can make phone calls. We'd call 2 people. We would call Elizabeth and we would call Bethany. So it's always nice to have a little bit, because so far we're starting day 3 and we haven't seen a person yet. Okay, so we get out. The morning's cold. We wake up. We blast out the first 4 miles. We get to Pasico right around the airport. On the road, we're able to call both Bethany and Elizabeth, and then we talk to them for a little bit. But of course, we have limited time on our cell phones and stuff like that, battery power, so we don't talk too long. And then we just continue on. Now, day 3, it's starting to warm up. It's a sunny day. It's kind of 45 degrees. and it's we're hiking pretty much in just our long underwear tops at this point. So conditions, this we do need snowshoes, but we're sinking in a little more. But we're we're making good time. We're doing about 2 miles an hour. We were able to end the day at 4:40, which is great, and we made it to Spruce Lake number 3 lean-to that night, and it was great. Now, the one thing about camping on a lake, which is funky, is during the summer they have lean-tos on lakes because there's tons of water. But during the winter time when everything freezes, there's no water. So the only way I got water that night, I didn't bring enough fuel really to melt snow. That takes substantially more fuel to melt snow than just water. So I had to go out on the lake, and because it was warm that day, it was all slushy, and that's where I was able to get all the water. It's basically that little bit of slush on top of the lake. So one exciting thing we saw that day is right before getting there, we saw a bunch of moose tracks that had been going back and forth through the trail. So that was
very cool.
Yeah, that was a good day.
Yeah, the moose activity on the Northville-Placid Trail is very strong. When I was there in the spring, their droppings and their tracks were all over the place. I didn't get to ever see one, but yeah, it's exciting knowing that you are in moose territory. Some people may find it terrifying. I found it quite exciting. But cool. So you went to Spruce Lake number 3. Great lean-to, great view. When the snow is melted, you just had a view of looked like a giant field basically at that point, or a frozen lake. But that's great. You got some water. So at the end of day 3, how are the blisters feeling? How are you guys feeling? You had a phone call. You came to kind of civilization, so I'd assume that was probably a nice mental pick-me-up to be back into out of the woods for even just the couple miles down the road in Pasico. And then, how are you feeling mentally and physically as you got to camp at the end of day 3?
For me, I was feeling good at that point. I knew we had just finished day 3. We were making the time I wanted to make, and the weather. I knew the next couple days were going to be it was going to be further. There was going to be a further warm up, so I was worried about those crossing trails, how there going to be flooding and stuff like that. So at this point, I felt good about our past 3 days, but I was a little hesitant because of the next 2 days. So, Henry, you can take it from here.
Yeah, it felt like we had kind of finished, in some regard, the first section of the trip. And then as we're going through Pasico, my dad was telling my mom how the next section would really determine if we were going to finish or not. Just, it's a kind of remote section for a while. We knew that the weather was going to be warming up. So it was kind of like a nice break getting into camp early and just like preparing yourself mentally and physically for the next stretch. But it was definitely refreshing.
Yeah, sure. You definitely are approaching that section from basically Pasico to pretty much the Moose River Recreation, Cedar River Flow area. There is no bailout. You're on your own. So yeah, that's a totally remote section of the trail that you are approaching at that point. There's no roads anywhere, and you're going through the West Canada's region coming up. So yeah, that's definitely a point where it's like, okay, wish me luck. Here we go. So day 4, you ended up doing a little over 16 and a half miles. Another, day basically right on pace with what your average was supposed to be. What was the weather like that day? So you had some nice sunny weather lately and some nice warm temperatures. So obviously warm temperatures also can make winter hiking in particular somewhat more difficult at times due to the soft snow versus, temperatures in like, let's say 20 degrees. Sometimes it's actually easier to hike in than 50 degrees in the wintertime. So how did the trail look for day 4 for you guys?
Yeah, so the trail, we knew it was going to be warming up